The windows shimmered under the soft light of the halogen lamps, and each diamond seemed to have a life of its own, winking at passers-by through the spotlessly clean glass. I adjusted my snow-white blouse and looked around the sales room with a critical eye. 30 years ago, when the late Arthur and I had first opened this store, I'd never imagined that Heritage would become one of the most respected jewelry stores in historic downtown Cincinnati. Mrs. Sterling, you have a customer for an engagement ring, said Jessica, a 26-year-old sales associate with impeccable manners and an innate flair for expensive jewelry. She had worked here for 4 years and knew every pendant and ring in our collection by heart. I nodded and walked toward the young man, who was nervously fumbling with the edge of his jacket. I'd seen hundreds of them, men in love, ready to spend several months' wages on a symbol of eternal love. With an experienced eye, I assessed his suit, his watch, his shoes. Middle class, but with ambition. So, a budget of about $5,000 to $7,000. Welcome to Heritage. My name is Barbara. I realize choosing a ring is a big decision. Tell me about your fiancé. What kind of jewelry does she like? The young man was visibly relaxed. Something in my calm tone and professional confidence had a magical effect on my clients. In half an hour, we chose an elegant ring with a half-carat diamond in a classic white gold setting. The price was $6,800. I packed the purchase in a branded ivory box with a gold-embossed logo. Good luck to you, I sincerely wished, escorting the buyer to the exit. The second hall of the store was reserved for the exclusive collection and VIP clients. There were leather armchairs, a coffee table with catalogs, and a small bar with crystal. It was in this room that I held meetings with buyers of expensive jewelry, sets for $20,000 or $30,000, exclusive watches, vintage brooches. The walls were decorated with reproductions of paintings by Renoir and Degas in gilded frames. Toward 6 in the evening, Mrs. Kowalski, a regular customer of ours, entered the salon. She was an elegant woman in her 60s, the wife of a famous heart surgeon who bought something new every quarter. Today, her attention was drawn to a pair of pearl earrings from the new collection. Barbara, my dear, these earrings are divine, she said as she tried them on in front of the mirror. Mikimoto pearls? Yes, classic pink pearls, set in 18-karat gold. The price is $4,200, I said, carefully adjusting the earrings in my client's ears. Mrs. Kowalski didn't hesitate to pull out her credit card. These customers were the backbone of our business people with established wealth, who valued quality and were willing to pay the right price for it. They recommended us to their friends and colleagues, and Heritage thrived on word of mouth among Cincinnati's wealthy. Barbara, the supplier from New York, called, Jessica said, carefully arranging a new shipment of silver bracelets in the display cases. The shipment of Swiss watches was a week late. Tony also wondered when work could resume on Main Street. Tony Rodriguez, the foreman of the construction crew, had been working on my second store for a month. It was smaller, but it was in the heart of a shopping district where rent was sky high. After the renovation, it was planned to open a boutique of vintage jewelry and antique watches. The investment in this project was about $150,000, but I was sure that they will pay off in 2 years. Tomorrow, I'll go to check how things are going, I answered, mentally calculating the list of things to do tomorrow. Today, I need to sort through the invoices and check the safe. Ralph, our second salesman, an elderly man with 30 years of experience in jewelry, was delicately advising a middle-aged couple on their wedding anniversary. His graying whiskers and aristocratic manners instilled confidence in his customers, and his knowledge of the history of each stone and metal helped him find the perfect options for the most capricious buyers. The workday at Heritage ended at 8 in the evening, but I often stayed until 9 or 10, sorting through paperwork in my small office off the second hall. There was an antique mahogany desk, Arthur's silver wedding present, a leather armchair, and a safe hidden behind a painting of a Tuscan landscape. The safe held particularly valuable jewelry and documents, including insurance policies worth more than $2 million. Arthur taught me the ins and outs of jewelry making. He was able to determine the authenticity of a diamond with a single glance, distinguish the shades of gold by color, and knew the history of every large stone that passed through our hands. After his death 5 years ago, I was afraid I couldn't do it alone, but the store not only survived, it thrived. The turnover increased by 30%. The customer base expanded, and now we had customers coming to us even from neighboring states. The secret of success was simple: quality jewelry, fair prices, and individual approach to each client. We did not chase quantity, preferring to work with those who really appreciated beauty and craftsmanship. There were no cheap fakes or mass-produced goods in our catalog, only real jewelry from trusted suppliers. Jessica and Ralph were already tidying up the store, cleaning the windows, counting the proceeds, putting especially valuable jewelry in the safe. This nightly procedure was practiced to the point of automatism. For the day, we sold jewelry for $17,000. Not a bad result for an ordinary Tuesday. At 8:30, a customer called about an order. A wealthy collector from Columbus was interested in a vintage Patek Philippe pocket watch. We had a couple of interesting 19th century pieces, but the price was prohibitive, $45,000 for the watch alone. We agreed to meet the following week. The phone rang again as I was checking inventory lists. My son's name, Roger, came up on the display. My heart clenched involuntarily. Calls from him lately meant only one thing: another money problem or a lecture about my unreasonable lifestyle. "Hi, Mom." Roger's voice sounded tired and irritated. "Listen, we have a situation. Kira's sick with a fever of 40, and the pediatrician costs like an airplane. Insurance doesn't cover everything. I was wondering if you could help with the money." Kira is Brittany's daughter from her first marriage, an 11-year-old girl with asthma and bronchitis. Private doctors in Cincinnati were really expensive, especially pediatric pulmonologists. But Roger was making good money, about $60,000 a year at a real estate company, and Brittany worked as a receptionist at a dental clinic. "How much do you need?" I asked, even though I knew it was unlikely I'd ever get that money back. "Well, $500 would be enough. Maybe 600 just in case. You know how expensive everything is these days. We do it ourselves, but we're a week away from payday, and our credit cards are maxed out. $500, less than the cost of one ring from our storefront. For my son, I was just a source of financial help in times of need. He had no idea that I'd sold $17,000 worth of jewelry just today, and the store's monthly profit was about $25,000 net. "Okay, Roger, I'll put it on the card tomorrow," I said, writing the amount in my notebook. "Thanks, Mom. You're a lifesaver. By the way, Brittany said you should do less shopping. It's not very safe at your age. You should stay home and watch TV, less shopping." At 72, in good health and a clear mind, I should be at home watching TV. And my thriving business, my 24 employees, my loyal customers, all of that, in my son's opinion, is just senile bliss. "Roger, I have to close up store. I'll talk to you later." "Okay, Mom, just take care of yourself, okay? And think about what we talked about. Maybe it's time to take a break from all this business." A break from all this. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of the office for a while, looking at the picture of Arthur on the desk. He was smiling from a black and white photo taken the day the store opened. We were young then, full of plans and dreams. Arthur wanted to create a family business that would pass on to his children and grandchildren, but our only son saw me only as a source of financial help and a burden to be sent to a nursing home. The showcase shimmered under the soft light of halogen lamps, and each diamond seemed to have a life of its own, winking at passers-by through the spotlessly clean glass. I adjusted my snow-white blouse and looked around the sales room with a critical eye. 30 years ago, when the late Arthur and I had first opened this store, I'd never imagined that Heritage would become one of the most respected jewelry stores in historic downtown Cincinnati. Mrs. Sterling, you have a customer for an engagement ring, said Jessica, a 26-year-old sales associate with impeccable manners and an innate flair for expensive jewelry. She had worked here for 4 years and knew every pendant and ring in our collection by heart. I nodded and walked toward the young man, who was nervously fumbling with the edge of his jacket. I'd seen hundreds of them, men in love, ready to spend several months' wages on a symbol of eternal love. With an experienced eye, I assessed his suit, his watch, his shoes, middle class, but with ambition. So, a budget of about $5,000 to $7,000. Welcome to Heritage. My name is Barbara. I realize choosing a ring is a big decision. Tell me about your fiancé. What kind of jewelry does she like? The young man was visibly relaxed. Something in my calm tone and professional confidence had a magical effect on my clients. In half an hour, we chose an elegant ring with a half-carat diamond in a classic white gold setting. The price was $6,800. I packed the purchase in a branded ivory box with a gold embossed logo. Good luck to you, I sincerely wished, escorting the buyer to the exit. The second hall of the store was reserved for the exclusive collection and VIP clients. There were leather armchairs, a coffee table with catalogs, and a small bar with crystal. It was in this room that I held meetings with buyers of expensive jewelry, sets for $20,000 or $30,000, exclusive watches, vintage brooches. The walls were decorated with reproductions of paintings by Renoir and Degas in gilded frames. Toward 6 in the evening, Mrs. Kowalski, a regular customer of ours, entered the salon. She was an elegant woman in her 60s, the wife of a famous heart surgeon who bought something new every quarter. Today, her attention was drawn to a pair of pearl earrings from the new collection. Barbara, my dear, these earrings are divine, she said as she tried them on in front of the mirror. The pearls are from Mikimoto? Yes, classic pink pearls, set in 18-karat gold. The price is $4,200, I said, carefully adjusting the earrings in my client's ears. Mrs. Kowalski didn't hesitate to pull out her credit card. These customers were the backbone of our business people with established wealth, who valued quality and were willing to pay the right price for it. They recommended us to their friends and colleagues, and Heritage thrived on word of mouth among Cincinnati's wealthy. Barbara, the supplier from New York called, Jessica said, carefully arranging a new shipment of silver bracelets in the display cases. The shipment of Swiss watches was a week late. Tony also wondered when work could resume on Main Street. Tony Rodriguez, the foreman of the construction crew, had been working on my second store for a month. It was smaller, but it was in the heart of a shopping district where rent was sky high. After the renovation, it was planned to open a boutique of vintage jewelry and antique watches. The investment in this project was about $150,000, but I was sure that they will pay off in 2 years. Tomorrow, I'll go to check how things are going, I answered, mentally calculating the list of things to do tomorrow. Today, I need to sort through the invoices and check the safe. Ralph, our second salesman, an elderly man with 30 years of experience in jewelry, was delicately advising a middle-aged couple on their wedding anniversary. His graying whiskers and aristocratic manners instilled confidence in his customers, and his knowledge of the history of each stone and metal helped him find the perfect options for the most capricious buyers. The workday at Heritage ended at 8 in the evening, but I often stayed until 9 or 10, sorting through paperwork in my small office off the second hall. There was an antique mahogany desk, Arthur's silver wedding present, a leather armchair, and a safe hidden behind a painting of a Tuscan landscape. The safe held particularly valuable jewelry and documents, including insurance policies worth more than $2 million. Arthur taught me the ins and outs of jewelry making. He was able to determine the authenticity of a diamond with a single glance, distinguish the shades of gold by color, and knew the history of every large stone that passed through our hands. After his death 5 years ago, I was afraid I couldn't do it alone, but the store not only survived, it thrived. The turnover increased by 30%, the customer base expanded, and now we had customers coming to us even from neighboring states. The secret of success was simple: quality jewelry, fair prices, and individual approach to each client. We did not chase quantity, preferring to work with those who really appreciated beauty and craftsmanship. There were no cheap fakes or mass-produced goods in our catalog, only real jewelry from trusted suppliers. Jessica and Ralph were already tidying up the store, cleaning the windows, counting the proceeds, putting especially valuable jewelry in the safe. This nightly procedure was practiced to the point of automatism. For the day we sold jewelry for $17,000. Not a bad result for an ordinary Tuesday. At 8:30, a customer called about an order. A wealthy collector from Columbus was interested in a vintage Patek Philippe pocket watch. We had a couple of interesting 19th century pieces, but the price was prohibitive, $45,000 for the watch alone. We arranged to meet the following week. Around 8 in the evening, when the last customers were leaving the salon, I went to my office to sort out the documents. Invoices from suppliers, orders for exclusive jewelry, contracts with jewelry designers. All this paperwork required my personal supervision. No one but me knew all the intricacies of our business. I was sitting at my desk, checking invoices from a Swiss watch supplier, when my cell phone rang. My son's name, Roger, came up on the display. My heart squeezed involuntarily. In recent years, our communication had been minimal, and calls from him never boded well. "Hi, Mom." Roger's voice sounded tired and irritated. "How are you doing? I hope you're not spending a lot of money on nonsense." "I'm fine, son. What about you?" "Look, Mom, we've got a problem. Kira's sick with a fever of 40, and a private pediatrician costs a fortune. Insurance doesn't cover everything, and the neighborhood doctor has a 2-week waiting list. Can't you help?" "Well, whatever you've got." Kira is Brittany's daughter from her first marriage, an 11-year-old girl with asthma and a weak immune system. For my granddaughter, I was willing to spend any amount of money, but it ticked me off how carelessly Roger asked for money without even wondering where I was getting it from. "How much do you need?" I asked, knowing it would never come back. $500 for the doctor and medicine will be enough. We would do it ourselves, of course, but you know how hard it is now. You can't feed a family on one paycheck. Roger worked as a manager in a real estate agency. His annual income was about $50,000. Brittany worked as an administrator in a dental clinic. For an American family, it was quite decent money, but they managed to live beyond their means and regularly got into debt. "Okay, son, I'll wire it to your card tomorrow morning." "Mom, you're a lifesaver." "Oh, by the way, Brittany wanted to talk to you. She thinks it's dangerous to live alone at your age. Maybe you should consider a home for the elderly. It's got 24-hour care, meals, and peer support. A home for the elderly. At 72, in perfect health and a clear mind, I'm supposed to go to live out my life among the infirm. And my thriving business, my 20 employees, my regular customers. Roger didn't even take that into account because he didn't know about it. "Roger, I feel fine, and I'm not moving anywhere. Come on, Mom, think about it. You're not getting any younger. And then imagine how much money you'll save. You won't have to pay rent, utilities, groceries, and the rest of the money can be given to us while you're still alive. Why wait till probate? Here it is. The real reason for all this caring advice. Roger and Brittany had already calculated the value of my modest apartment and decided it was time to pick up the inheritance. They had no idea that in one day alone, my store makes more than my son's monthly salary. Son, it's late and I have important things to do tomorrow. What kind of things? Mom, you're retired. The most important thing is to take care of your health. Good night, Roger. Okay, Mom, but think about what we said. We're genuinely concerned about you. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of the study for a long time, looking at Arthur's picture on the desk. When we married 45 years ago, he had dreamed of creating a family business that would be passed on to his children and grandchildren. But our only son saw me as a burden, unaware of the empire Arthur and I had built over the years. Maybe it was time to open his eyes, but something told me the knowledge of my income would only inflame his greed, not his respect for his mother. Sunday lunch at Rogers was always a test of strength. I stood in front of the mirror in the hallway, adjusting my modest gray dress and the cheap costume jewelry I'd bought especially for such meetings. My real closet, elegant suits from famous designers, pearl necklaces, and gold bracelets remained in the closet. The family had to see a poor pensioner barely making ends meet. Roger and Brittany's apartment was located in a new apartment complex on the outskirts of Cincinnati. A two-bedroom apartment with modern IKEA furniture and a huge TV they'd bought on credit. Roger met me at the door, giving me a quick peck on the cheek and immediately stepping aside. Hey, Mom, come on in. Brittany's in the kitchen doing her magic. The son looked tired. 38 years old, but he already had wrinkles around his eyes and the first gray on his temples. Working in a real estate agency was not easy for him. Constant competition, nervous clients, unpredictable income. In good months, he earned up to $4,000. In bad months, he barely made $2,000. Grandma Barbara, Kira shouted joyfully, running out of her room. The 11-year-old threw herself around my neck, and for a moment, all family problems receded into the background. Kira was the only bright spot in this house, a sincere and direct child who loved me for nothing, not because of money. How's school going, sweetie? I asked, hugging my granddaughter. Great. We have a math test tomorrow, but I learned everything, and we're going on a field trip to the museum, but we have to pay $20 for a ticket. Kira, don't bother your grandmother with your problems, Brittany said sharply, appearing in the kitchen. She doesn't have any money. Brittany Collins, maiden name Fisher, was a bright blonde in her 30s with ambitions far beyond her means. A divorced single mom, she saw marriage to Roger as a social elevator and an opportunity to provide a better life for her daughter. The problem was that Roger wasn't as successful as she'd hoped, and his mother wasn't as malleable or willing to share the money. Hi, Brittany, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Oh, Barbara, how are you? I could hear the poorly concealed irony in my sister-in-law's voice. I hope you didn't spend the last of your money on the bus, because at your age, you have to save money on everything. I remained silent as I walked into the living room. The walls were decorated with family photos and cheap reproductions of paintings in plastic frames. There were celebrity magazines and catalogs from TV stores on the coffee table. Brittany loved anything bright and expensive, but she complained constantly about the lack of money. Sit down at the table. Dinner is almost ready, the hostess announced with a strained smile. The dinner table was set for 4. Plain dishes, plastic cups, paper napkins. It was obvious that the family was really saving on the little things. But I knew the problem wasn't income. It was the inability to manage money properly. Roger and Brittany were living beyond their means, buying things they couldn't afford. How's your appetite, Mom? Roger asked, pouring cheap wine into glasses. Nothing sick? I'm fine, thanks. Brittany brought fried chicken with potatoes and canned vegetables from the kitchen. She was a good cook, but she always chose the cheapest food and then complained about the quality of the food. By the way, Barbara, Brittany began, slicing the chicken, I've been thinking about your situation. You live alone in this old apartment. You have no money. You're in poor health. Maybe it's time to think of a more sensible solution. What kind of solution? I asked cautiously. Well, about a nursing home, for example. Now there are very comfortable conditions, and 3 meals a day, and medical staff, and entertainment programs. And most importantly, you do not have to spend on rent, utilities, groceries. It's all about saving money. Kira lifted her surprised eyes from her plate. Mom, why would Grandma go to a nursing home? She's not old. Kira, don't interfere in adult conversations, Brittany told her. Eat in silence. I'm not going anywhere, I said firmly. But think sensibly, Barbara, my daughter-in-law continued, ignoring my words. How long do you have left? 10 years? 15? Why waste that money when you can give it to us up front? Kira needs a good education. College is expensive. Mom's right, Roger supported his wife. Mom, you realize that your pension is penniless. By selling the apartment and moving to a nursing home, you'll provide yourself a decent old age, and you'll help us with Kira. A decent old age. They talked about my life as if it were a commodity to be sold properly. Not interested in my plans, desires, or feelings. The main thing is to get the money from the sale of the apartment as soon as possible. What if I don't want to sell the apartment? I asked. Then what happens to it after you die? Brittany shrugged. The state will take it away. Taxes will eat it up. It's better to dispose of it wisely when you're alive. Mom, we're not greedy, Roger interjected. We're just thinking about practicality. Why do you need such a big apartment? And besides, in a nursing home, you'll find company. You won't be bored. Companionship. Roger sincerely thought that at 72, I had no other interest but to sit with the same old ladies and discuss my ailments. He didn't realize that every day I'm scheduled by minutes. Meetings with suppliers, consultations with designers, negotiations with clients, quality control of new jewelry. Speaking of money, Brittany put down her fork and looked at me with poorly concealed irritation. Roger said you'd help with the doctor for Kira. When are you going to transfer? Because the bills aren't waiting. Tomorrow morning, I answered briefly. Thank you. Although, to be honest, I'm tired of asking you for handouts all the time. If you'd listened to our advice, you'd have enough money for everything. If you sold your apartment, you'd get 100,000, maybe even more. Some for the nursing home, some for our needs. Good for everybody. $100,000. That's a ridiculous amount of money compared to what I make in a year. Just yesterday, we had an $80,000 deal with a collector from Chicago who bought a vintage watch and an emerald bracelet. But to Brittany, $100,000 was a cosmic sum that would solve all her problems. And while you're being stubborn, she continued, getting into a frenzy, we have to save money on everything. Kira can't take music lessons because piano lessons cost money. We can't go on vacation because we have to save for her education. All because you're selfishly clinging to your apartment. Brittany, don't talk to your mom like that. Roger interceded uncertainly, but there was no firmness in his voice. What's wrong with that? She snapped. I'm telling the truth. She lives alone in a 2-bedroom apartment, spends her money on nothing, and when she needs help for her family, she has to grovel and beg. It's not normal. Kira squirmed in her chair, looking at her mother and stepfather. The child felt the tension, but didn't understand what she was talking about. For her, I was just her favorite grandmother, who always found time to play and listen to school news. Mom, really? Roger tried to soften the situation. Maybe we should at least consider our options. We could take a trip together, look at some nursing homes. It's not what it used to be. Modern complexes with swimming pools, libraries, their own doctors, and hair salons. Brittany added. And diet canteens. No worries, just live and enjoy. Live and enjoy. Among strangers, on a schedule, supervised by nurses. And my store, my employees, my customers, all of that should just disappear because my daughter in law has decided that at 72, it's time to retire. I'm not ready for that kind of change, I said, trying to stay calm. Ready, not ready, Brittany said. Time is of the essence. You're wasting money every month, and that money could help Kira. She needs good clothes, tutors, classes, and we deny the child everything because of your stubbornness. Mom, I don't want Grandma to leave, Kira said quietly. Nobody's asking you, Brittany said sharply. You're still young. You don't understand what's best for the family. I looked at my son, hoping to see at least a shadow of sympathy or understanding in his eyes. But Roger avoided my gaze, concentrating on chopping potatoes. He was completely under his wife's influence and dared not object to her plans. Okay, let's not talk about it today, Brittany said suddenly. But promise me you'll think about it. We're not your enemies. We want what's best for you. What's best for them, not me. Lunch continued for another half hour in a tense atmosphere. Brittany talked about the problems at work, complained about the prices at the stores, and made plans for the future that included me only as a source of money. Roger nodded in agreement and occasionally glanced at me with guilty eyes. As I was about to leave, Brittany walked me to the door with a fake smile. Thanks for coming, Barbara, and think about our offer, okay? Time flies fast. It's better to decide everything in advance. I nodded silently and left the apartment. I stood in the elevator for a long time, looking at my reflection in the mirrored walls. An old woman in a cheap dress and worn shoes. That's exactly how my family saw me, a useless burden whose days were numbered. Monday began with a phone call from Tony Rodriguez at 7 in the morning. The foreman never just called, and an early call usually meant trouble on the construction site. I put the phone to my ear, already mentally preparing myself for more trouble. Mrs. Sterling, good morning. Sorry to be early, but we have a situation. Last night, the workers opened up the wall for wiring, and there were old lines that weren't on the blueprint. We're going to have to change the wiring plan. The second store on Main Street was more trouble than I'd bargained for. The 19th century building, with its thick brick walls and intricate utilities, required individual attention to every detail. But the location was worth it, right in the heart of the historic district, where tourists and locals alike enjoyed spending money on pretty things. How much would this add to the time and budget? I asked, jotting down the details in my notebook. 3 days for the electrician, plus about $2,000 for additional materials. I'm sorry, Mrs. Sterling, but there's no way around it. $2,000. That's a lot of money to most people, but to me, it's the price of one good ring. I'm used to old buildings always costing more than the budget, and I've budgeted for a 20% contingency. All right, Tony, do it right. I'll be there around 10 o'clock to take a look. After the call, I had a leisurely breakfast, watched the morning news, and picked out clothes for my visit to the construction site. Old jeans, a work jacket, and comfortable boots. An outfit in which I could safely climb through the scaffolding and check the quality of work. That's what I wore to the construction site, and at Heritage I changed into business suits. It was a 20-minute car ride from my house to Main Street. My dark blue 2007-year-old Lexus was modest enough not to attract too much attention, but it was reliable and comfortable. Arthur had always said that a car was not a way to show off wealth, but a tool for work. The construction site greeted me with the sound of drills and the smell of fresh plaster. Tony Rodriguez, a stocky man of about 45 with calloused hands and attentive dark eyes, was already waiting for me at the entrance. He had been working with us for 3 years and had proven himself to be an honest and reliable contractor. Come on, I'll show you the problem, he said, leading me inside the building. The room, of about 150 square meters, was divided into two halls. In the future, it would house a boutique for vintage jewelry and antique watches. The large windows looked out onto the busy street, and the high ceilings created a feeling of spaciousness and elegance. Look at this. Tony pointed to an uncovered wall where old copper pipes and wires were visible. This wiring is from the 50s, and the gas pipe is from before the war. According to safety codes, all of this needs to be replaced. I scrutinized the problem area, thinking about how it would affect the overall design of the room. The layout had been thought out to the last detail. An area for expensive jewelry with a reinforced security system, a corner for consultation with clients, a place for demonstrating watch movements under a magnifying glass. And how will this affect the layout of the showcases? I asked. Nothing. We will run the main communications along the ceiling and hide them behind decorative panels. Showcases will stand where they were planned. We went around the room discussing the details of finishing. The floor was planned to be made of cream-colored natural marble, the walls in pastel colors with decorative plaster. The lighting had to emphasize the beauty of the jewelry on display without creating harsh shadows or glare. When will the furniture arrive? Tony asked, making notes in his notebook. The display cases were ordered from an Italian manufacturer and promised to be delivered in 3 weeks. The chairs and tables for the consultation area are already in stock. We'll bring them as soon as you finish with the floors. Italian showcases cost a lot, $35,000 for a set, but they were worth it. Bulletproof glass, built-in alarm system, elegant design, and the ability to adjust the lighting for each compartment separately. Such showcases were used in the best jewelry salons in Europe. Around noon, the electrician arrived, a thin man with a neat beard and a professional look. The three of us went around the room one more time, discussing the new wiring scheme. I like to participate in all stages of the work, control the quality, and make adjustments as needed. What kind of security system will it be? Asked the electrician. A complete system, I answered. Video surveillance, motion detectors, direct communication with the security service, uninterrupted power supply in case of power failure. Safety was the #1 priority. The new store was going to display jewelry worth up to $50,000 apiece, and any negligence could be very costly. The insurance company had already approved a $2.5 million policy, but only if a state-of-the-art security system was installed. In the afternoon, we discussed the schedule of work. The renovation was to be finished in a month, another week to install the equipment and furniture, and in the middle of the next month, we could open a second store. I had already arranged for 3 sales assistants who specialized in vintage jewelry and antiques. Mrs. Sterling, will there be advertising? Tony asked, putting away his tools. Of course, ads in the local papers, brochures for tourists, an internet site. Plus, regular customers from the main store are already interested in the new collection. The marketing budget for the second store was $15,000. I planned to hold a grand opening with local celebrities and press. Such events always attracted attention and helped to quickly build up a client base. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I went to the main store. The day shift was already in full swing. Jessica was counseling a young couple about engagement rings, and Ralph was showing an older lady a collection of pearl necklaces. I went into my office to sort through the day's backlog. On the desk was a stack of letters from suppliers, utility bills, and a proposal for collaboration from a jewelry designer from New York. The young artist offered an exclusive collection of rings with unusual stones. Tanzanites, alexandrites, Paraiba tourmalines. The prices were biting, but the potential profit was significant. I carefully studied the catalog of the designer's works. Modern style, interesting combinations of metals, stones with unusual cuts. Such jewelry could be the highlight of the new store, attracting collectors and people looking for something special. Barbara, may I come in? Jessica came into the office. Sure. What's up? A representative from a Swiss watch company called. They're offering to become official dealers in Cincinnati, a contract for the exclusive sale of their models in our region. Exclusive dealership is always additional profit and prestige. Swiss watches were in steady demand among wealthy customers, and exclusivity allowed us to set higher prices. But it also meant obligations on purchase volumes and additional requirements to the design of the sales room. What are the conditions? I asked. A minimum order of $100,000 per quarter, staff training at their expense, a special showcase for their products. Profitability promises 40% of every hour. 40% profit is an excellent figure for the jewelry market. Usually the markup was 20 or 30%, but here they offered much more favorable conditions. The minimum order of $100,000 per quarter was also acceptable. Our VIP clients easily bought watches for $10,000 to $15,000. Schedule a meeting for next week, I decided. Let them come with samples and a detailed sales proposal. The day was coming to an end when my cell phone rang. It was Mrs. Anderson, the wife of a local banker, who had ordered a special necklace for her daughter's wedding. The job was almost finished, and the client wanted to come in for a final fitting. Barbara, darling, I'm so excited. When can we see the finished necklace? We'll have it ready by lunch tomorrow. You're welcome to come anytime you like. The necklace for Mrs. Anderson's daughter was a work of art. 18 perfectly shaped pearls on a white gold chain with diamond inlays. The cost of the work was $28,000, but the result was worth it. Such orders strengthened the reputation of Heritage as a store of exclusive jewelry. In the evening, closing the store, I summarized the day. The renovation of the second store was on schedule, despite unforeseen difficulties. New business opportunities appeared regularly, and I was not going to miss them. At 72, I felt energetic and full of plans for the future. If Roger and Brittany knew what kind of empire I had created, they would probably change their attitude toward me. But for now, they just saw me as a burden that they wanted to get rid of as soon as possible. Tuesday began with an unpleasant surprise. Tony called at 7:30 in the morning with the news that an old water pipe had burst overnight in the Main Street building, and the first floor was partially flooded. I quickly got dressed in my work clothes and went to assess the damage. The picture was not the most pleasant. The water had seeped under the new floor screed, and now I would have to open up the flooring to dry the subfloor. Tony and his crew were already working to repair the damage, but there was plenty of dirt and construction dust. How much time would that add to the time? I asked, surveying the damaged area. 3 days to dry, plus a day to rebuild the screed. The foreman answered, wiping his hands with a dirty rag. I'm sorry, Mrs. Sterling, but no one is immune to these things. I spent nearly 4 hours at the site coordinating the plumbers, construction workers, and the insurance company representative. By lunchtime, my work jacket was covered in dust and splashes of dirty water. My jeans were stained with plaster, and my boots were covered in mortar. I looked like a worker who'd been working on repairs all day. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I drove to Heritage to change my clothes and get on with the day's business. In the trunk of the car, there was always a set of a change of clothes, an elegant suit, a blouse, and shoes with a small heel. But first, it was necessary to go to the store and warn the employees about the possible delay in opening the second salon. Jessica and Ralph were working with customers when I entered through the service entrance. The sales room had the usual everyday atmosphere: soft classical music, muffled voices, and the chime of jewelry in the display cases. I walked to my office, leaving muddy boot prints on the polished parquet. Barbara, how's the construction going? Jessica asked, noticing my appearance. A little accident, but nothing critical. We'll be delayed a few days, no more. I was about to go into my office to change when the bell over the front door rang. Brittany entered the store, a bright blonde in a pink dress and white high-heeled shoes. She was clearly going to an important event, and wanted to find the right jewelry. My sister-in-law didn't notice me right away. I was standing in the back of the sales room, my back turned to the entrance. Brittany walked over to the counter where Jessica was laying out the new bracelets and began to look at the merchandise with a connoisseur's eye. "Welcome to Heritage," Jessica said politely. "What can I do for you?" "I need earrings to go with my pink dress," Brittany announced, taking a critical look at the jewelry on display. Something elegant, but not too expensive. Up to $200. $200 at our store would only buy a simple pair of silver earrings with Fianites. Real jewelry started at $500 and up. But Jessica was a professional and could work with clients of any budget. "Sure, we have a few good choices," the saleswoman said, pulling a tray of mid-priced jewelry out of the display case. I was about to slip quietly into the office when Brittany turned around and saw me, her face contorted with an expression of squeamishness and irritation. In my dirty work clothes, dusty hair, and dirty hands, I really did look like a janitor or a laborer. "Excuse me, but who is this person wandering around?" Brittany asked loudly, pointing in my direction. "I'm sorry, I don't understand," Jessica said, confused. "It's that woman in the dirty clothes." Brittany raised her voice, attracting the attention of the other customers. In a decent store, cleaners are supposed to work after hours, not scare customers with their appearance. Ralph, who was counseling an elderly couple in the far corner of the hall, raised his head and looked anxiously in our direction. A few customers turned around too, curious about the cause of the noise. "Madam, it's a misunderstanding." Jessica tried to calm the situation. There was no misunderstanding. Brittany was furious. "I came to an expensive store to buy beautiful jewelry, and there's some dirty girl in between the windows. It's obscene." I stood in silence, watching the play that my daughter-in-law was playing. There was nothing unexpected in her behavior. Brittany always considered herself superior to people she considered socially inferior. Salesmen, waiters, cleaners. To her, they were all a service category, unworthy of respect. "Beggar, get out of here," Brittany shouted, taking a step in my direction. "You don't belong among decent people." She shoved me with her shoulder, trying to push me away from the window. I swayed in surprise, but kept my balance. A few drops of dirty water from my jacket fell on the shiny parquet. "Madam, please calm down." Jessica looked extremely worried. "This is unacceptable." "What is unacceptable?" Brittany was furious with righteous anger. "I'm paying a lot of money for jewelry, and they're making me uncomfortable. Where's the manager? I demand that this person be removed immediately." Ralph left his customers and quickly approached us. His face expressed confusion and a desire to resolve the conflict as quickly and quietly as possible. "What's the problem?" he asked in a polite tone. "The problem is that you have a dirty cleaning lady loitering in your store while you're working." Brittany pointed her finger in my direction. "I demand that she be thrown out immediately." "Madam, let me explain," Ralph began. "There's no need to explain," Brittany interrupted him. "Either she goes or I go, and I'll never set foot here again." At that moment, Jessica came up to me and quietly asked, "Boss, should the security guard kick out this unprincipled customer?" The word boss sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Brittany froze with her mouth open, not immediately realizing what she had heard. Ralph breathed a sigh of relief, and several customers who had been watching the conflict began to whisper among themselves. "What? What did she say?" Brittany muttered, slowly turning her head toward me and Jessica. "She said boss," I replied calmly, taking off my dirty jacket. "Because I own this store." Brittany's face turned white as chalk. She opened and closed her mouth, trying to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Her confidence and aggression instantly evaporated, giving way to shock and confusion. "You're the owner?" She finally squeezed out. 30 years, I answered, unbuttoning my dirty shirt. Heritage is my brainchild. Brittany looked around at the lavish display cases, the expensive jewelry, the elegant interior. In her eyes, I could see the feverish calculations, how much a store like this could cost, what kind of revenue it would bring in, what kind of capital lurked behind those walls. But, but how? She still couldn't come to her senses. We thought that I was a penniless pensioner? Yeah, that's exactly what you thought. Jessica delicately offered me a clean hand tissue, and Ralph went back to his customers, pretending that nothing much was going on. But I could see him struggling to hold back a smile. But I didn't know, Brittany began in a pathetic voice. If I had known, would I have acted differently? I looked at her closely. That's interesting. So respect depends on the thickness of your wallet? Brittany glanced around, looking for support or at least sympathy, but the customers and employees of the store pretended to be busy with their own business. She was left alone with me and the realization that she had just made an irreparable mistake. Barbara, I wanted to. She tried to move closer, but I stopped her with a gesture. You wanted what? I deliberately switched to you to emphasize the distance. You wanted to insult someone for their appearance? To humiliate someone you thought was beneath you in social status? No, I didn't think, Brittany said, quieter and quieter. You didn't think. That's right. I grabbed my purse off the counter. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to change. I have a business meeting in an hour. I headed toward my office, leaving Brittany standing in the middle of the sales floor with a look of utter despair on her face. Behind me, I could hear Jessica politely wondering if she still wanted to see the earrings, and my sister-in-law's confused reply that she had changed her mind about buying jewelry. In the office, I quickly changed into a clean suit and tidied up. In the mirror, I looked at me as an elegant businesswoman, the owner of a successful enterprise, a person accustomed to making serious decisions. No one would have believed that half an hour ago I was mistaken for a cleaning lady. When I returned to the sales floor, Brittany was still standing at the entrance, hesitant to leave and unsure of what to say. Her pink dress didn't seem so bright anymore, and her confidence was completely gone. Brittany stood at the entrance to the store as if struck by thunder. Her face was pale, and her eyes were filled with panic and desperate attempts to rethink what had happened. The pink dress in which she had so proudly entered the salon an hour ago now seemed ridiculously bright against her confusion. I walked calmly over to the pearl display case, checking to see how Ralph had laid out the new arrivals. A few moments of silence gave Brittany time to realize the magnitude of her blunder and me time to enjoy her confusion. 30 years in business had taught me to appreciate those moments when the masks come off and people show their true colors. Barbara finally dared to speak. Her sister-in-law came closer with uncertain steps. Can I talk to you? In private? I looked up from the pearl necklace I was examining. Brittany's face contorted into a forced smile. She was clearly preparing for a difficult conversation, one in which she had to extricate herself from an uncomfortable situation. Go ahead, I said coldly, not suggesting that she go into the office. Well, maybe in a more private setting. Brittany glanced at the other customers of the store, who, though pretending to be busy choosing jewelry, were clearly listening to our conversation. This is a good place to talk. I put the necklace back in the display case and turned to face her. What did you want to say? Brittany licked her lips nervously and began to speak in a quiet, almost pleading voice. Barbara, I want to apologize for what happened. It was a terrible misunderstanding. I just didn't know that this store, well, if I had known who you really were, I never would have let myself. Let yourself what? I interrupted. Insult a person for their appearance? Call people beggars? Push and demand that someone be kicked out of a store? Well, I didn't know, Brittany exclaimed, raising her voice, and then regaining her composure, went back to whispering, "If I had known that you owned it, of course I never would have." So it wasn't that you were being rude, but that you didn't know who you were dealing with? I scrutinized her face, which reflected frantic attempts to find the right words. No, of course not. Brittany waved her hands. I don't usually act like this. It's just that I'm having a hard day. My nerves are on edge, and I snapped. It's out of character for me, honestly. The lies came out of her mouth so naturally, as if she really believed what she was saying. I remembered yesterday's lunch, where Brittany had made the same arrogant comments about the nursing home and my worthlessness. The rudeness and disregard for people was part of her character, not the result of a bad day. I see, I replied dryly. So it was a one-time flare-up. Yes, it was. Brittany cheered, thinking I was ready to believe her. Barbara, you know how I usually am. We're family. And besides, think of all the wonderful news this is. It turns out Kira has such a successful grandmother. She's going to be thrilled when she finds out. There was a joyful note in her voice, as if she was already imagining how she would brag about her rich mother-in-law to her friends. Brittany's eyes sparkled with anticipation of the new opportunities that were opening up before her. And you know, she continued, excited, now we don't have to worry about your future. You're well provided for. You can live wherever you want and however you want. And Kira will be able to help with her education. And Roger and I. Stop. I stopped her abruptly. What are you talking about? Well, about family. About how we're gonna be able to. Brittany paused, realizing that she'd started making plans for my money too soon. Be able to what? Spend my money? I took a step forward, and Brittany instinctively backed away. No, of course not. It's just, well, your family, we could, she stammered, trying to find the right words. I mean, if there's anything you can do to help the people who tried to put me in a nursing home yesterday? I didn't raise my voice, but every word sounded like a whiplash. Brittany's face went pale again. She realized she was failing, so she tried a different approach. Barbara, come on, nobody put you in anything. We were just concerned about your health, your safety, when you live alone at that age. But it's different now. Now we know you're on your own and independent, I interrupted her. Yesterday, I was a decrepit old woman who was wasting her money and should be sent to live out her life in a state home. Today, I'm suddenly independent. What's changed? Am I younger? Healthier? Well, no, of course not. Brittany fiddled with the strap of her purse, clearly realizing she'd backed herself into a corner. Then what? I waited for an answer, even though I knew it was coming. It's just, we realize now that we were wrong, she finally said. We didn't know the truth of the situation, and we were just basing our conclusions on the fact that we thought I was poor, right? Brittany nodded, hesitating. So your respect for people depends on the size of their bank account? I took another step forward, and my sister-in-law pressed her back against the glass window. No, it's not, she protested, but her voice shook. Then explain to me why a woman in work clothes deserved to be insulted and shoved, while a shopkeeper deserved to be apologized to and fawned over. The question hung in the air. Brittany opened and closed her mouth, trying to find an answer that would justify her behavior, but no such answer existed. Several of the store's customers had already made no secret of their interest in what was going on, and Jessica and Ralph were exchanging eloquent glances. Barbara, let's not fight. Brittany tried a conciliatory tone. We're family. Kira loves you very much, and Roger loves you too. Are you really going to let one misunderstanding ruin our relationship? A misunderstanding? I raised my eyebrows. That's a very interesting definition for what happened. Well, I explained. Bad mood, stress, fatigue. It happens to everyone. Brittany tried to feign remorse. The important thing is that everything is clear now, and we can start over. A fresh start on what? Our relationship, she exclaimed with fake joy. Now that we know the truth, we can communicate as equals. You're a successful businesswoman. I'm a working mom. We have so much in common. In common. The woman who an hour ago was calling me a beggar and demanding I be kicked out of the store was now looking for common ground. Brittany's cynicism knew no bounds. Equal? I questioned. Does that mean you're not going to ask me to move into a nursing home anymore? Of course not, Brittany hastily assured me. That's ridiculous. Why would you want a nursing home when you have such a great business and such an interesting life? An interesting life. Yesterday, my life was boring and meaningless, and today, it's suddenly interesting. It's amazing how quickly grades change when bank account information changes. And what do you suggest? I asked, although I already guessed the direction of her thoughts. Well, Brittany carefully began to outline her plan. Maybe we could see each other once in a while, not just at family dinners, but as friends. You could tell me about the business, share your experiences, and she stammered, realizing she had nothing to offer in return. What about you? I could, help with something. Brittany was clearly improvising. Like advertising? I mean, I know a lot of people. I could recommend your store to friends, coworkers, an ad from the receptionist at the dental office. It was so ridiculous, I almost laughed. Heritage's clientele are wealthy people who value quality and are willing to pay the price. Brittany's friends were hardly in that category. That's a very generous offer, I said in a flat tone, but I'm going to have to turn it down. Why? Brittany looked genuinely surprised. We can be useful to each other. We can, but we don't want to. I grabbed my purse from the counter. At least I don't want to. Barbara, wait! Brittany grabbed my arm, but I yanked her back. Don't touch me. But we can't just walk away. There was a note of desperation in her voice. Think of Kira. It's not her fault. Kira. Of course, Brittany would try to use her daughter as a final argument. It was an old-fashioned tactic to use the children as a cover when all other arguments had been exhausted. It's really not Kira's fault, I agreed, and I'm not going to hold her hostage to adult conflicts. Then why are you destroying the family? Brittany exclaimed, raising her voice. Several customers turned in our direction, and Ralph moved toward us with concern, apparently ready to intervene if necessary. I'm not destroying anything, I replied calmly. I was just opening my eyes to what had already been destroyed by your hands. My hands? Brittany tried to act indignant. I've always treated you with respect. Respect? I looked at her carefully. Do I need to remind you about the nursing home argument yesterday? Or how I was wasting my money and should give it to you in advance? Brittany's face turned pale again. She realized that I hadn't forgotten a single word she'd said since lunch yesterday. That, that was poorly phrased, she mumbled. That's not what I meant to say. What was what? That we care about you. We want you to be happy. Happy in a nursing home, giving you all the money? I clarified. Brittany realized she had fallen into another trap and decided to change tactics. Okay, she said with the tone of someone who was making sacrifices. I admit that I was wrong yesterday. I apologize for what I said. But there's a way to make it right, isn't there? A clean slate? A clean slate? I repeated it thoughtfully. Why, do you know how to treat people humanely? Or would that have to be fixed too? Of course I can, Brittany assured me fervently. It's just that sometimes, well, there are difficult moments. Difficult moments when you're calling people beggars and pushing them around in stores? Barbara, I can't take it anymore, Brittany exploded. I apologized. What more do you need? Get on your knees. Nothing, I said calmly. Just get out of my store and don't come back. But, Brittany began. No buts, I gestured to Ralph, who came over to us. Ralph, escort this lady to the exit and explain to the guard that she's not to show up at Heritage again. Yes, Mrs. Sterling. Ralph nodded and took Brittany's arm politely but firmly. Wait, she shouted, trying to get away. You can't do this to me. What am I going to tell Roger? What am I going to tell Kira? Tell the truth, I advised. Tell me how you feel about people you think are beneath you. Barbara, you're going to regret this, Brittany shouted as Ralph led her away. Roger's not going to let it go. The door closed behind her with the soft tinkle of a bell. There was silence in the store, broken only by the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. The customers gradually returned to looking at the jewelry, but I could see that they were still exchanging impressions of what had happened. Jessica approached me with a concerned look. Barbara, is everything all right? Everything's fine, I replied, adjusting my jacket. Just getting rid of an unpleasant client. She said you were related. I was mistaken, I replied briefly. I have no relatives who behave like that. The rest of the workday passed quietly. The clients of Heritage were well-mannered and tactful. No one asked unnecessary questions about the incident, although I saw curious glances and heard muffled conversations. By 6 p.m., everything was back to normal. Jessica was consulting a young man about a bracelet for a girl. Ralph was helping an elderly lady choose a brooch, and I was sorting out invoices from an Italian supplier. About 7:30, Mrs. Anderson called. She wanted to reschedule the pearl necklace appointment for tomorrow because her granddaughter was suddenly ill. We arranged for 11 in the morning, and I made a note on my calendar accordingly. At 8 p.m., the staff and I went through the usual store closing procedure. Particularly valuable jewelry went into the safe. The display cases were locked, and the alarm system was activated. Jessica and Ralph went home, and I stayed late in the office to finish my paperwork. Around 9 p.m., the house phone rang. I was just about to leave, but I decided to answer it. Perhaps it was a customer calling about an urgent order. Roger's indignant voice sounded on the other end of the line. Mom, what the hell happened today? He didn't waste time on greetings. He got straight to the point. Good evening, Roger, I replied calmly. What are you talking about? About what you did to Brittany. She came home crying, telling some incredible story about you owning a jewelry store. What kind of nonsense is that? Her son's voice sounded irritated and incredulous. Apparently, Brittany had already given him her version of events, which certainly made her look like an innocent victim of my injustice. It's not bullshit, Roger. Heritage really is my store. It has been for 30 years. It can't be. He exploded. Mom, what are you talking about? What store? You're living on your pension. I live on the income from the business I built with your father. I explained patiently. I get a pension, but it's less than 1% of my real income. There was a long pause. Roger was obviously trying to digest the information that was changing his perception of my financial situation. But why didn't you ever tell me? He finally squeezed it out. Why should I? You were never interested in my life. For you, I was a source of monetary help in times of need, nothing more. That's not true, Roger protested, but there was uncertainty in his voice. We've always taken care of you. Cared? I couldn't help but chuckle bitterly. Yesterday at lunch, your wife suggested sending me to a nursing home and dividing my inheritance in advance. You call that caring? But we didn't know. Roger raised his voice. If we had known about the store, surely no one would be talking about the nursing home. Exactly. If we knew about the money, and without the money, you can get rid of the burden. Mom, don't twist things around. We were genuinely concerned about your health. Your safety. Worried about how to get the inheritance quickly? I interrupted him. And your wife has clearly demonstrated that today. What exactly did she demonstrate? Roger's voice turned aggressive. Brittany says you humiliated her in front of the whole store. You made her look like an idiot. I didn't do anything. Your wife made a fool of herself, I said coldly. What do you mean by herself? She came into the store as a normal customer, and you made a scene. I wondered what Brittany's version of the story was. Judging by Roger's reaction, she portrayed herself as the innocent victim of my aggression, but she didn't mention her own behavior. Roger, what exactly did your wife tell you? That she came in to buy earrings and you yelled at her and kicked her out of the store and in front of other customers. That's inappropriate. I see. Did she mention the fact that she called people beggars and pushed her around? What? Roger was confused. What does that have to do with beggars? Because your wife mistook me for a cleaning lady and demanded that I be kicked out of the store immediately, in front of other customers, by the way. It can't be, Roger muttered, but the confidence in his voice had faded. Yes, it could. She saw a woman in dirty work clothes and thought she had the right to insult her. She yelled, "Beggar, get lost," and pushed me away from the window. Mom, you must be confused about something. Roger weakly tried to defend his wife. Brittany couldn't have said that. She could and she did, in front of witnesses. But, but even if she did, Roger was clearly trying to make excuses. She didn't know you were the owner. She thought you were really a cleaning lady. And that justifies the insults? I felt anger rising inside. So it's okay to call cleaning ladies beggars and push them around? Well, no, of course not. But, my son stammered, realizing he'd backed himself into a corner. But what, Roger? Go ahead. It's just, sometimes people get nervous, they snap. That doesn't mean they're bad. People take it out on people they think are weaker than themselves, I said. I wonder if your wife would yell at a customer in a mink coat. Roger didn't say anything because the answer was obvious. Mom, okay, he finally said in a tired voice. Let's say that Brittany wasn't on her best behavior. But you could have explained the situation in a human way instead of publicly humiliating her. Public humiliation? I repeated what he said. Roger, your wife screamed for an hour in the store, insulting people and demanding I be kicked out. And when she found out who I was, she started fawning and scheming for my money. Where's the humiliation in that? You kicked her out, Roger exclaimed, in front of everyone. She says she's never been so ashamed in her life. Ashamed of what? For making her behavior public? For treating her like a piece of trash? I treated her exactly as she deserved to be treated, I said firmly, and the way she treated people. Mom, she's family. Roger took on a pleading tone. You can't do that to family? Family? I thought about that word. Roger, what does family mean to you? Well, close people who support each other, care about each other, and planning how to get an old lady into a nursing home so they can inherit. We didn't know about your store. He went back to his old song. That's exactly the problem, I replied. Your care depended on my bank account, a poor grandmother to a nursing home, a rich one to be respected. That's not true. We honestly thought you'd be better off in a specialized facility. Better for who, Roger? Me or you? The son was silent again. The question was rhetorical, and we both knew it. Okay, Mom, he finally said. Let's say we were wrong about the nursing home, but it's different now. Now we know the truth. What's different? What's different? Now we can have a normal conversation. You're a successful businesswoman. You have an interesting life. We're proud of you. Proud? I couldn't contain my laughter. Yesterday I was a worthless old woman, and today you're proud of me. What exactly has changed in me in the last 24 hours? We just, we didn't know. Roger obviously realized the absurdity of the situation, but he couldn't admit it openly. We didn't know and didn't want to know. 30 years, Roger. 30 years I've been going to work every day, meeting with clients, dealing with business matters, and not once have you ever asked me what it is I do. Well, we thought you were just, hang out at the mall, meet up with your girlfriends. Shopping. 72 years old, every day from 9 to 8, and sometimes on weekends, too. That makes sense. Mom, stop it. Roger was getting annoyed. I admit we were wrong, but you can't just tear everything apart over one conflict. One conflict? I interjected. Roger, it's not one conflict. This is the result of years of treating me like a burden. We've never treated you like a burden. No. Who suggested we sell my apartment and put me in a nursing home? Who complained about having to spend money on me? Who said I was wasting my time with store talk? Roger was silent. The arguments had run out. Mom, he finally said in a low voice, what do you want from us? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Live your lives the way you've been living them, only without me. But what about Kira? She loves you. Kira can come and visit me whenever she wants, alone or with you, without Brittany. You can't stop my wife from seeing you. I can and I do. She will no longer be in my house, in my store. Mom, that's absurd. Roger was outraged. We're a family. We were a family until today. What if I came over and talked to you? Explained that Brittany's sorry, that she's ready to apologize. Roger, I interrupted him, your wife already apologized. Today, at the store. You know what she said? What? That if she knew who I was, she would never have been rude. So the problem isn't her behavior, it's that she didn't know about my money. Well, maybe she didn't put it well. Roger, be honest. Do you support your wife's behavior? Yeah, he hesitated. If that's what she was doing, no, of course not. But, no buts, yes or no? No, I'm not. But Mom, for Kira's sake. Kira came to me before your marriage, and she'll come to me after. But your family life is no longer my business. Mom, you can't do this. Roger sounded desperate. We can work things out. We can talk. We can explain. Explain what? That for 30 years you thought I was a worthless old woman? Or that your respect for me depends on the size of my bank account? Mom, please forgive us. We were wrong. We realize that. Roger, I said softly, you only realize it now that you know about the money. And if I hadn't? His son remained silent because the answer was obvious. Exactly, I said. Good night, Roger. And tell your wife she's not coming into my store again. Security's been alerted. Mom, wait. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of the office for a long time, looking at the phone. 38 years ago, I gave birth to this boy, raised him, loved him, dreamed of what he would become. And he's become a man who judges people by their bank account and lets his wife insult her own mother. Arthur always said that family is sacred. But what do you do when your family only sees you as a source of money? After talking to Roger, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I lay in bed, looking at the ceiling and thinking about how dramatically my life had changed in one day. In the morning, I had been a mother and grandmother, albeit not a much appreciated family, and now I was just Barbara Sterling, a jewelry store owner who no longer had any close relatives. Strangely, I didn't feel bitterness or regret. It was more like relief that the masks had finally come off and everything was falling into place. Years of pretending that family relationships were normal, years of turning a blind eye to neglect and self-interest were all in the past. I got up early in the morning and drove to the store as usual. Work always helped me deal with my personal problems. among beautiful jewelry, surrounded by polite customers and loyal employees. Life seemed orderly and predictable. Jessica greeted me with a wary look, clearly worried about last night's incident and unsure whether to bring up the subject. "Barbara, is everything all right?" she asked quietly, helping me out of my coat. "Everything's fine," I replied, and it was true. Just clearing up some family matters. "If you need help," Jessica began, but I stopped her with a gesture. "Thank you, dear, but these are personal matters, not work-related." At 11 o'clock in the morning, Mrs. Anderson came in for her pearl necklace. The elegant old woman was delighted with the work of our craftsmen. 18 perfect pearls shimmering on a velvet backing, and diamond inlays added a touch of sophistication to the jewelry. "Barbara, it's just gorgeous," she exclaimed, trying on the necklace in front of the mirror. "Lisa will love it. A piece of jewelry like this will become a family heirloom." A family heirloom. I involuntarily thought about what would become of my jewelry, of the store, of everything Arthur and I had created over decades. Roger had no interest in jewelry, and Brittany only saw jewelry for its monetary value. Turning the business over to them would be a crime against her husband's memory. After Mrs. Anderson left, I called my attorney, Gerald Hopkins. We had known each other for 15 years, a solid man in his 60s with an impeccable reputation and a sharp mind. It was he who had helped me with the paperwork after Arthur's death. "Gerald, I need a meeting. Today, if possible." "Of course, Barbara. Is something wrong?" "I need to revise my will, drastically." "I see. I can see you at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Is that okay?" "That's fine. I'll see you then." I arrived at the lawyer's office exactly at the appointed time. Gerald Hopkins accepted clients in an old building in the center of the city. High ceilings, oak panels on the walls, leather chairs, and the smell of expensive furniture created an atmosphere of respectability and reliability. "Barbara, it's good to see you," the lawyer said, rising from the table. "Please have a seat. Tea, coffee?" "Coffee, thank you." Gerald poured coffee from a silver coffee pot and sat down opposite me, ready for a serious conversation. "So, what happened? As I recall, the last time we adjusted your will was 2 years ago. At that time, your son Roger was the primary beneficiary." "He was. Now he won't be," I replied briefly. "I see. May I ask why?" I told the lawyer about the events of the last few days, not hiding the details. Gerald listened attentively, occasionally making notes in his notebook. He was a professional and didn't show surprise or judgment. He just recorded the facts that affected the legal consequences. "It's a rather unpleasant situation," he said when I finished my story. "But from a legal point of view, it is clear. You have every right to dispose of your property as you see fit. Are there any restrictions? Can Roger contest the will?" "In principle, he can, but the chances of success are minimal. You do not have a mental illness and are of sound mind and clear memory. Relatives can only contest a will if there is good reason to believe that the testator was incapacitated or acting under duress." "And the granddaughter? Can Kira claim an inheritance?" "She is not your direct heir because she is not your biological granddaughter, but you can include her in your will in a separate clause if you want." I thought about that question. Kira was the only bright spot with Roger's family, but she was also Brittany's daughter. Leaving her an inheritance meant giving Brittany the ability to manage that money until the girl came of age. "Let's put the Kira issue on hold for now," I decided. "Let's decide on the main heirs first." "Okay, who do you see as the primary heirs?" That was the main question I had been pondering all night. I had no biological heirs left. Roger was an only child, and his children had not yet come along. The rest of my relatives were distant and unfamiliar. "Gerald, what do you usually do in these situations?" "Well, there are various options." They create charitable foundations, donate property to educational institutions, leave it to employees of their companies. Some people sell the business while they're alive and manage the money themselves. I don't want to sell the business. Heritage is my life's work. Then you can think about passing it on to employees. Create a scheme where key employees gradually buy a stake in the company. It was an interesting idea. Jessica and Ralph had worked with me for many years, knew the specifics of the business, and genuinely loved their jobs. They could continue the tradition of heritage, preserve its reputation, and develop it further. And how would this be technically formalized? You could set up a trust that would manage the transition of ownership. You remain the owner for the rest of your life, but you already determined the terms of the business transfer. Employees get shares depending on seniority, qualifications, personal contribution. Interesting. What about philanthropy? That's also an option. You can create a scholarship fund for students studying jewelry, or support young jewelry designers, or help elderly people who really need care. The last idea seemed particularly attractive to me. How many lonely old people are living miserably in shabby nursing homes while their children dream of getting their inheritance as soon as possible? My money could help these people get the care and attention they deserve. Gerald, can you prepare some drafts of a new will? Sure. How much time do I have? A week or two. There's no rush, but I don't want to take too long. Okay. I'll prepare 3 or 4 options: transferring the business to employees, creating a charitable foundation, a combined option. In the meantime, think about the details. We discussed the technicalities for another hour or so. Gerald explained the tax implications of different inheritance schemes, the procedure for setting up trusts and foundations, and the timing of when a will takes effect. The more we talked, the clearer it became that I had many options for disposing of my estate for the public good. Barbara, the lawyer said as we were finishing our meeting, I don't want to interfere in your family affairs, but I'll ask you this. Are you sure about your decision? Shouldn't you give your son another chance? Gerald, I answered, putting on my coat. My son has had 38 years of chances, and he has disappointed me every time. That's enough. I understand. I'll see you next week then. As I walked out of the lawyer's office, I felt strangely relieved. For the first time in years, I was thinking about the future not in terms of family duty, but in terms of my own desires and beliefs. My inheritance would go to those who really needed it, not to those who thought it was their right. I came home in the evening and sat in the living room for a long time looking at family photos. Here's Roger at 5 years old, smiling merrily in his father's arms. Here he is in his school uniform, serious and focused. A wedding photo with Brittany, where they both look happy and hopeful. Somewhere along the way, this sweet boy turned into a greedy egomaniac who only sees his own mother as a source of money. Maybe it's my own fault for spoiling him too much, for not teaching him to appreciate what he has. Or is it just that kind of character? To take, but give nothing in return. It doesn't matter. What is important is that I finally realized that a real family is not a blood relation, but mutual respect and love. And I have another family: store employees, regular customers, people who see me as a person, not a bank account. Tomorrow, I will start a new life, without illusions about family debt, but with clear plans for the future. It's been 3 months since the day Brittany caused a scandal in my store. 3 months of a quiet, measured life with no family drama, no recriminations, and no trying to beg for money. I didn't realize how much easier it would be to breathe once the constant stress of dealing with ungrateful relatives was gone. The second store on Main Street opened at the beginning of the month and immediately attracted the attention of lovers of vintage jewelry. Tourists were eager to buy antique brooches and pocket watches, and local collectors lined up for exclusive pieces. In the first 2 weeks of operation, revenue exceeded my wildest predictions. The Swiss watch company also signed an exclusive dealership agreement with us. Heritage now had the only showcase of their products in Cincinnati, and customers were willing to travel to us even from neighboring states. The special lighted and climate-controlled display case had become a true gem of the main store. Jessica was promoted and was now officially called Deputy Director. The girl was excellent at administrative tasks and could fill in for me in any situation. Ralph became a senior consultant and supervised work with VIP clients. Both of them were happy with their position and worked with redoubled enthusiasm. The new will was signed 2 weeks ago. Gerald Hopkins had prepared a neat scheme that allowed my employees to gradually buy out stakes in the business, with some of the money going to a charity I had set up to help the elderly. Roger was not mentioned in the document at all. A separate line in the will was a trust fund for Kira, $200,000 for her education, which she would receive at the age of 18. The money would go directly to educational institutions, bypassing Brittany's hands. The girl deserved a chance for a good future, regardless of her mother's actions. Kira herself came to see me every Saturday. We went to museums, theaters, amusement parks, enjoyed conversation without witnesses and extraneous opinions. The girl blossomed in front of my eyes when she could talk about anything that interested her, without fear of getting a reprimand from her mother for pestering Grandma. "Grandma Barbara, why doesn't Mommy come with us anymore?" she asked last Saturday when we were looking at paintings at the art museum. "Adults have disagreements sometimes, sweetheart, but it's not about you and me. And Daddy told me you had a grudge against them. Is that true?" Not resentful, disappointed. You see, when people act ugly, sometimes it's better to just stay away from them. Kira nodded with the serious look of an 11-year-old philosopher. "Like Madison in our class, she calls everyone names and then wonders why no one's friends with her." "That's about right." I smiled, amazed at the child's wisdom. Roger called me a few more times after that memorable conversation. First, he tried to convince me to forget everything and start over. Then he threatened to sue me. Then he asked me to restore the relationship, at least for Kira's sake. I was polite but firm. The family bond is finally broken. The last call was a month ago. Roger announced that he and Brittany were getting a divorce. "Mom, I realized you were right," he said in a tired voice. Brittany had shown her true colors. Since that incident at the store, she's been unbearable. She's been demanding money, throwing tantrums, accusing me of missing out on your inheritance. "I'm sorry," I said, and it was true. In spite of everything, Roger was still my son. "Mom, maybe now we can," he started to say, but I stopped him. "Roger, your divorce doesn't change anything. You showed your true colors that day, too. But I was on my wife's side. Every husband protects his family. You weren't defending your family. You were defending your wife's right to insult people. That's different. Mom, you can't do this anymore. Give me a chance to make this right." "Roger, you've had 38 years of chances, and you never took one of them." He never called again after that conversation. Kira moved in with him after the divorce because the court felt the father could provide a more stable environment for the child. Brittany was allowed to see her daughter on weekends, but most of the time Kira spent that time with me. This morning, while working in my office, I heard a familiar voice on the sales floor. Mrs. Kowalski was telling Jessica about her granddaughter's upcoming engagement and wondering if we had anything special for the occasion. I came out with a new collection of rings from an Italian designer. "Barbara, darling," she rejoiced. "How are you? You look beautiful." "Thank you, Marilyn. I do feel great. Do you remember 6 months ago when you seemed so tired? You said something about family problems. I hope things are better now." "Everything has been resolved in the best possible way," I replied, taking out a ring with a rare pink diamond from the showcase. Sometimes the best solution to a problem is to get rid of its source. Mrs. Kowalski had been buying jewelry from us for years and knew me well. She nodded understandingly, not asking too many questions. That's a wise attitude. At our age, it's especially important to surround ourselves with only nice people. We chose a dainty ring with a pink diamond surrounded by white stones. It cost $28,000, but Mrs. Kowalski didn't even flinch. For her, it was quality and beauty that mattered, not price. "By the way, Barbara," she said, signing the check, "my friend was interested in vintage jewelry. Could you give her a card for the new store?" "Sure. And tell her that on the recommendation of regular customers, we make a discount of 5%. After the customer left, I went back to my office and opened a folder with development plans. Next year, I was going to open a third store, this time in a prestigious shopping center in the suburbs. The concept was already ready: jewelry for young people, modern design, affordable prices. The new generation of customers demanded a new approach. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a representative of a German company producing equipment for jewelry workshops arrived. We discussed the possibility of creating our own jewelry production at the store. The idea was ambitious but promising. Unique handmade jewelry has always been in demand among wealthy clients. In the evening, as usual, I stayed late in the office, sorting out documents. In the silence of the office was especially acute felt the absence of constant stress, which used to create a family. No one called asking for money. No one lectured me on how I should live my life. No one made plans for my inheritance. Outside the window, the lights of evening Cincinnati came on. The city lived its life. Office workers hurried home, friends gathered in restaurants, theaters were preparing for evening performances. I was part of that life too, but not as Roger's mother or Brittany's mother-in-law, but as an independent person with my own plans and goals. I drove home with a sense of deep satisfaction. I had accomplished more in those 3 months than I had in the previous 3 years. I opened a new store, signed lucrative contracts, created a charitable foundation, established relations with my granddaughter. And all this without the constant pressure of my family, who saw my successes only as an opportunity to snatch a bigger piece. On the kitchen table was a postcard from Kira, a child's drawing with the inscription, "To my favorite grandmother." The girl had drawn the two of us in the park, holding hands and smiling. There were swings and a merry-go-round in the background, and the sun was shining brightly in the sky. I hung the card on the refrigerator next to Kira's other drawings. This was real family. People who love you just for what you are, not for what you can give. Late that night, before I went to bed, I sat at the desk in my bedroom and opened my journal. It was a habit I'd picked up in my youth, but in recent years, I'd written less and less often. Now, I wanted to record my thoughts and feelings. 3 months of a new life, I wrote. 3 months without pretending that family relationships are normal. Surprisingly, I don't feel empty or lonely. On the contrary, life has become fuller and more interesting. When you don't have to constantly live up to other people's expectations or put up with boorish behavior, there's plenty of energy left for the really important things. Roger made his choice 38 years ago when he decided his mother existed to solve his problems. Brittany showed who she really is when she thought she could insult beggars with impunity. I too have made my choice to live for myself and not for ungrateful relatives. Tomorrow, a normal working day in my favorite store awaits me. Meetings with interesting people, beautiful jewelry, new projects, and no one will reproach me for wasting my time on nonsense or plan my death to receive an inheritance. I am happy, for the first time in years, truly happy. Closing my journal, I looked at the picture of Arthur on my bedside table. He was smiling from that picture with his kind, understanding smile. "I'm sorry, darling," I said quietly. It took me a while to realize that family is not a blood relation, but a mutual respect. We must have raised our son poorly. Outside the window, the night city was quiet. Life went on, and I was a full participant in it. Not someone's mother or mother in law, but simply Barbara Sterling, a woman who had built a successful business and now enjoyed the deserved fruits of her labor, without the extra baggage of ungrateful relatives.